wage gap. So the gender wage gap, as it were. Now, the thing about it was this was kind of a big issue when Obama was president. He tried to jump in on this, and like a lot of things that he had good intentions for, it kind of got screwed up right from the onset. So he approached this whole thing about, well, it's 70 cents on the dollar, right? Women make per men, right? And of course, what ends up happening is that's all anybody talks about is the number, right? And then it becomes this, well, it's really only 6 cents or 10 cents or whatever kind of crap. It's like, that's not the point. Even if it's 2 cents on the dollar, it's wrong. You shouldn't be getting paid a different amount for the same work, right? Because of your sex, right? Or your skin color or anything, right? But of course, that's how the conservatives had to spit. Oh, no, that's the number. Focus on the number, right? And that's how they got that whole kind of screwed up. But I want to start off this. This is Jon Oliver, and he did a whole bit on this, but I wanted to show this little bit here. He did a whole thing on the gender gap back in 2014. Just to give you an idea of how long this has been a problem. This goes way back before that even. But I'm just going to take a real quick clip from him, and hopefully HBO doesn't sue us.
Problem, but how to quantify it.
Right.
The Labor Department itself, the president's own Labor Department says it's 81 cents. Another federal study, for example, says the disparity is more like 88 cents for every dollar. The studies do show that when you do the controlling, there's about a 9% gap. The wage gap is really somewhere between 5 and 7 cents. Women who do not get married have virtually no wage gap. They earn 96 cents for every dollar a man makes. Look, even if 96 cents is the number, which it isn't, it's still terrible. Let me put this in terms that are perhaps easy to understand. If someone takes a dump on my desk, the size of the dump is not the issue. I'm not going to say, well, how big of a dump is it? 8 inches? 10 inches? Oh, just 3 inches? Well, that's almost like you didn't take a dump on my desk at all.
I mean, he's not wrong.
It's a funny show. If you haven't seen it, that whole episode is really good too. But no, it's a funny show. But he's right. It's essentially the same. It's like somebody took a dump on your desk. We're not really caring about the actual penny per dollar, right? But that's what they have to make it into, because it's a red herring away from the issue. So if you haven't seen that episode, you should see that last week tonight episode. But that's the thing that we need to talk about. So why is it that it happens? Okay. And a lot of it is just sort of sexism in general. They've taken studies where they'll put Jennifer and John on the exact same resume. The only thing they'll change is the first name from Jennifer to John. And the guys, the ones that have John on them, are more likely to get offered more money up front if they select them. Then they're more likely to be selected. So there is a degree where women just get underpaid because businesses think they can get away with it, right? Now, the other thing about that is there's some of that. Some of the other big issue with the gender gap is, like they said, women tend to peak earlier, and I'm going to show you this just to kind of give you an example. So this is just how much American men earn at every age versus women too, right? So Bureau of Labor Statistics, second quarter. So this is median age groups, and then so this is the first one. I think was this is men, and then women are down here. So men 16 to 19, 26,000. Women same age, 21. Right? 2024, 28 to 31, 40 to 46. See, women make a lot less. But as you see here, women peak out right here, 35 to 44, 47. Men don't peak out until much later. right?
Interesting.
Well, but what is the other thing that happens? Ageism, right? Which affects women more than men,
Yes, that's absolutely true.
right? Um, and there's kind of a stigma where it's like, oh yeah, you can still be a 55-year-old guy and still be good looking.
Right?
Not so likely with women. Not such a thing, right?
Women start getting hit with the perception of being old
Mm,
at much younger ages than when those ideas get applied to men, for sure.
right. So there's social stigma that gets applied to this with age in women versus age in men, right? Expectations. The other thing is there's also societal stigma. I would argue where women start out and this is just statistically true that women are more likely to stay in a position longer than men, especially young men, and that's just a fact. Young men tend to bounce around. The other thing about that is the women. So you feel like as an employer, well, you can probably pay them less; they're still more likely to stay, right? As opposed to a young man, it feels like I have to pay him more to keep him because they're statistically more likely to leave, right? The other thing about that is you got to think about it from an employer perspective of healthcare, which is, and this is why I think that healthcare is kind of detestable in this country, is if we have a healthcare system where it's dependent on your employer to provide healthcare, right? Then it's hard to leave your employer, and especially if you have family or kids,
Hmm.
because you can't have a 5-year old and then not have healthcare for 3 months while you're switching jobs. Because if that kid gets sick or something, it's going to be devastating, right? Financially, it's going to cripple you. So a lot of times people stay in positions, and a lot of times women stay in positions just to keep their health care. So women tend to be kind of stuck in positions because they're tied to the healthcare and they can't leave, even though they could probably go get a better job or they want to go get a better job. They can't, right? So there's a negative to that too. Plus, you got to figure in, even as a woman, just to maintain your own personal health and sexual health, it's a lot more maintenance than it is for a man. You have to go see a gynecologist. A lot of times, women are the ones that are doing birth control, right? For guys, birth control mostly is just go get some condoms. For women, it's a fucking procedure. They got to go to a doctor and they got to go get prescription shit, and it's not just
Right.
yeah, it's not just I can just walk into 7-Eleven, right?
Right. Multiple steps, multiple visits, which means multiple bills that get attached to insurance.
Right.
So insurance is obviously going to be paying more out for women, just trying to cover the same similar need, being birth control need or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, and it's the whole thing about they talked about emancipation of women, and part of that whole thing was if you give women control over their birth cycle, their reproductive cycle, then then you allow them into the system and let them work, the floor rises, the economy gets better, everything gets better, and it worked every time in history, and every country has done it. But once again, if now that's dependent on the employer, it's kind of a way for the employer to wrangle some control and keep prices down and wage down. That would be I would counter argue that. I mean, you could probably argue against that, but for me, I mean, I could see that a lot. Where it's like for a young guy, if you're single and you don't have kids, it's like, oh, I don't need the healthcare for 3 months. You can sort of justify it, but it's harder if you're a young woman and it's like, well, fuck, I got to go see a gynecologist or I have these, things going on or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're a guy, you're kind of like, you get a physical maybe once every 2 years if you think about it. So it's just one of those things. But I think that was a good example to show that just women just in general make less at every age group. And they tend to peak out about that age, about the time they get to their 40s, when they start tending to get looking older. You know what I'm saying? As where men don't peak out until their 50s, and actually their early 60s, because it's less. I think it's less appearance based. and more experience-based for men. As with women, I think it's the reverse. So that would just be my argument on that. Did you have anything else you wanted to throw on that?
No, not in particular. I'm kind of curious what other people have to say about this. Do we?
So we have one more thing. So we haven't done this before. This will be a new thing. It's a PragerU video. This will be a little bit longer segment, but it'll be worth it. Trust me. Especially if you remember the dump on the desk analogy. That we don't care about the size of the dump, just that there's a dump on the desk. Right? So remember that. Keep that in mind. So this is PragerU. For those of you who don't know, PragerU is a guy, Dennis Prager. It's not actually a university. It's a YouTube channel. And what they do is they do conservative videos for teachers. They're trying to get it, conservative propaganda out as much as possible. So this stuff is all really, really backwards. They do fun stuff like, slavery is really black people's fault kind of stuff. yeah, no kidding. Yeah, when really white people were the hero because they ended slavery. Yeah.
Oh boy, here we go. Okay.
Their Confederate flag is good. Those kinds of guys. So this is on the wage gap, and they've got a philosopher, and she's an American Enterprise Institute. I forget her name, but it'll show her in a second. Anyway, she's going to argue there is no gender wage gap. Oh,
If for the same work women only make 77 cents for every dollar a man makes, why don't businesses hire only women? Wages are the biggest expense for most businesses, so hiring only women would reduce costs by nearly a quarter, and that would go right to the bottom line. Don't businesses want to be...
So, already, stupid argument number one. Women make less, so you should just hire all women because you can pay them less. Genius. How come businesses haven't thought of this? How come, Lise? How come?
I don't even know what to say. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Well, do you know why? Because they wouldn't be able to fill their employees. There aren't enough women. They're only had a little over half the population. They couldn't fill all those jobs.
All of the jobs that mathematically that doesn't even make any sense.
Plus, she's going to make an argument later that men tend to go into higher paying jobs, right? Well, if that's the case, then there aren't hardly any women to fill those jobs, are there? So so already she's going to contradict her argument. She will. All these things in a vacuum, I guess, make sense to her. But if you think about it, it doesn't. So the title of the video is "There is no gender wage gap," and her first argument is, "Well, there is. So why not just hire all women?"
So her first argument starts with the premise that there is one.
Right. So there is a dump on your desk, right?
Right.
Oh man, so that's it's just odd, but yeah, no, these are gonna be fun. I mean, this is all bad.
Profitable, or are they really just bad at math? Well, actually, it's the feminists, celebrities, and politicians spreading this wage gap myth who have the math problem. Here's why. The 77 cents on the dollar statistic is calculated by dividing the median earnings of all women working full-time by the median earnings of all men working full-time. In other words, if the average income of all men is, say, $40,000 a year, and the average annual income of all women is, say, $30,800, that would mean that women earn 77 cents for every dollar a man earns. 30,800 divided by 40,000 equals 0.77. But these calculations don't reveal a gender wage injustice because they don't take into account occupation, position, education, or hours worked per week. Even a study by the American Association of University Women, a feminist organization, shows that the actual wage gap shrinks to only 6.6 cents when you factor in different choices men and women make.
See, there it is. It's choices. That's what it is.
So women don't make good enough choices.
Right.
in order to make as
More money.
much money as men.
Right, but I also want to get to this. So she's using the AAUW, right? Which is I think their third way to feminism, which we can get into some other time. But so it shrinks from this, to 23 cents to 6.6. Okay. Once again, back to you're arguing about the size of the dump on my desk.
Right,
There's
right.
there's-
Instead of a 6-inch dump, it's a 1-inch dump.
Right. It's like there's still a turd on my desk. All right. I'm not going to leave it there just because it's 6 inches versus 1 inch, whatever, right? I'm going to sit there and say, let's get the turd off my desk and let's disinfect the desk. I'm not going to sit there and argue about how big it is. So that's, once again, it's the same argument, right? So even at 6.6 cents, if you factor in different choices and whatnot, well, if you look at that study, they're also talking about, yeah, but women are kind of forced into a lot of these situations.
Right, she just said choice of occupation being one of them, and education, etc. But doesn't she realize how obviously cyclical that all is? If women are being sort of pushed into certain types of jobs
Mm-hmm.
and being sort of having issues getting into other types of jobs, then naturally women are going to gravitate more toward the jobs that they feel they clearly can get.
Sure. Well, and the other thing
as opposed to ones that are, that are more prohibitive for them, that they have a harder time getting into. Not to say some won't, but that's obviously sort of cyclical based on what has been presented that you can do.
Well, and we looked at it. I mean, it's the parts of it we talked was part of it is the sexual reproduction, children, right? Women, and there are studies that show that, yeah, and she'll probably get into this. I can't remember exactly what she gets into here, but the women that are under whatever 40 something that don't have children tend to make about the same, right, as men. Well, see, there you go, ladies. Just never have children and never be older than 40, and you're golden. Come on, get the fuck out of town. It's just so. Let's see what choices women make that are debilitating them. Educate us, doctor.
Is choice. The small wage gap that does exist has nothing to do with paying women less, let alone with sexism. It has to do with differences in individual career choices that men and women make. In 2009, the U.S. Department of Labor released a paper that examined more than 50 peer-reviewed studies and concluded that the oft-cited 23-cent wage gap may be almost entirely the result of individual choices being made by both male and female workers. Well, let's look at some of those choices. Georgetown University compiled a list of the 5 best-paying college majors and the percentage of men and women majoring in those fields. Number 1 best-paying major, petroleum engineering, 87% male. Number 2, pharmaceutical sciences, 48% male. 3, mathematics and computer science, 67% male. 4, aerospace engineering, 88% male. 5, chemical engineering, 72% male. Notice that women outrepresent men in only one of the 5 top-paying majors by only a few percentage points. Now consider the same study's list of the 5 worst-paying college majors. Number 1, counseling and psychology, 74% female. 2, early childhood education, 97% female. 3, theology and religious vocations, 66% male. 4, human services and community organization, 81% female. And 5, social work, 88% female. Here, it's the women who lead in all but one category. Even within the same profession, men and women make different career choices that impact.
Okay, so let's stick with that one first. So, the question then becomes why? Are women more driven to those kinds of fields versus the others?
Well, there's a certain amount of socialization that I think definitely plays a role into it. As children, little boys are pushed towards certain things and little girls are pushed towards certain other things.
Sure.
So even from childhood, girls are taught to play nurturing games where you're, caring for individuals. You're supposed to be playing house and Barbies and things with mommies and taking care of things and teacher things and nursey things, right?
Right.
That's what little girls sort of get pushed toward doing. And not necessarily the same with little boys. And then you think about education, girls are pushed towards humanities, and those, are the kinds of things that girls are supposed to excel at.
Right. The other thing is the big thing she skips over from the labor report is when they're talking about the 23 cents, they're just talking about, okay, this is basically just sort of the, like she said before, the overall kind of guesstimate, right? And what we're doing, we're taking median income of women divided by median income of men, right? And that's, we're getting about 77%, right? Now, they go on in the report to go, yeah, so that's part of that number is factored in partly by how, different choices people make, right? And women societally tend to be driven towards these sort of lower paying kind of jobs. Now, it might also be that because they've been predominantly women, they've been lower paying jobs, that they pay higher if they've been predominantly men. We don't know that for certain, but it's possible, right? The other thing that they point out is it doesn't matter either way. Same job, women tend to make less than men. So the 23 cents, once again, goes back to, there's a dump on my desk. We're arguing about the size of it. I don't care how big it is. I want it off my desk. Right? That's the problem here. Is that she's still back to let's argue about the size of the turd on your desk. Like, I don't care.
As long as it's only a 1-inch turd, I'm not going to complain. If it becomes larger than a 1-inch turd, then it's a problem.
Right. Yeah. No, the turd itself isn't the problem. But that's the point. No, so now she's going to sit there and she's going to say, okay, even in the same careers, women make different choices, and that's what hurts them. Now, this is also going to be sort of misrepresented, but we'll go through it for fun, for giggles.
Packed how much money they make. Take nursing, where male nurses, on the whole, earn 18% more than female nurses. The reason? Male nurses gravitate to the best paying nursing specialties, they work longer hours, and disproportionately find jobs in cities with the highest compensation.
Okay. So once again, male nurses make 18% more. So why is that? Okay, she's saying, okay, well, they tend to have more specialized positions, right? Well, what does that tell you? That tells you that they had to go to school longer, probably. Or they were able to get into those specialized positions. And does that mean that women aren't doing that? And why not? Right? Plus, they talk about they're willing to relocate. Well, I hate to tell you this, but typically for a man, it's easier to relocate. You're a single woman, I'm sure you can do it too. But a lot of times women are in relationships. And the expectation is that if you move, the guy's not going to come with you. As where if you're a guy and you move, a lot of times the expectation she's going to come with you if you move for a job. Especially too if you're a woman and you're a nurse and you have kids. You can't just up and relocate. It's a lot harder.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that I think we're missing here. Is there's also these expectations that are put on them where it's like, well, look, what if it's a situation where she can't relocate because the healthcare? Well, if she had universal healthcare, it wouldn't be a problem. Men are willing to work longer hours. Well, if we had better daycare or funding for daycare, they might be willing to work longer hours.
Let's be honest, in our society, it is still put upon women very largely to be sort of the head of the child care, child rearing department.
Mm-hmm.
It is expected, even if the woman works full time. People, they don't like to say that nowadays, but it's, I think, still very much the point of view is that people are looking at the female and saying, okay, but you're supposed to be the one in charge of all of these varying things with children. Mm-hmm. So even if she's working full time, she might not be trying to take a bunch of extra shifts or work longer shifts, because it's still put upon her to be the primary source of child care, child rearing, running kids around, etc. As opposed to socially, it's more acceptable for men to take less of that responsibility and opt to work more, and that means that they're good fathers because they're good breadwinners. But you see, women, in order to be good mothers, don't need to be good breadwinners. They need to be Susie homemaker and soccer mom and, classroom parent or whatnot.
Which is an interesting... Go ahead.
Those sort of expectations socially have to be taken into account.
Yeah. Well, which is an interesting dynamic too, because more women are college graduates now than men. And that's been the trend for the last 20 years. Colleges have a hard time getting men to go to school. And there are a lot of women that do. So you would think if we were even doing the median, that number would be drastically different, because women would be making more money because they're higher educated just in general. But we don't see a huge change in that. And on top of the fact, okay, yeah, the guy's willing to work longer hours or relocate. Well, he's more flexible. He has the ability to negotiate for more money, is what you've just described. Right? As where the woman isn't in that situation. Okay, well, why is it that she's not? Is it because of her living situation, her kids or whatnot? Because she has these extra expectations? Is it things like, okay, maybe they're more likely to give men more hours because they just assume men are willing to work them, right? And some of that.
Well, now, Duncan, we've talked about expectations on women of taking care of children too, but then when you start getting into those slightly older age categories for women, 40s and beyond, it might be the expectation to be taking care of children, but what about aging parents? Who does that generally fall upon in heterosexual couples more, the male or the female?
The female.
Let's be honest. Females end up taking care of children and aging parents more frequently than men, which limits their availability and flexibility as well. They need more flexibility in their schedules. Therefore, they have to make more compromises with employers, which often can, relate directly to what their wages are.
All right. And my point is on top of yours, which is the assumption then is because women are taking care of kids or older parents or whatever, right? And that expectation is there. I'm more apt to go to my male employee and say, hey, will you work more hours than I am my female employee, because I've already got that assumption in my head. Even though the female employee might be totally willing to do it and want the money, it wouldn't occur to me right out of the gate.
So, I can add on to that from my perspective as being a female that does not have children and is not married. I have had employers automatically assume that I am available to work extra.
Right.
Because I do not have the status of being married or having children, as opposed to the females that do have children and are married, that they don't get approached for that as quickly. So I'm assuming probably for men, along, having the sort of social expectation that they're less in charge of those kinds of things, it becomes even more so that they become approached for those extra opportunities, extra hours, extra responsibilities, as opposed to women with children and spouses are frequently bypassed.
Right. Even if you are a guy and you're married with kids, you're more likely to be asked than your female employee, your female counterpart who's married with kids. You guys could be otherwise identical situations, but they're more apt to go to the guy first. The other thing about it is, and this is just true, is she skips right over is even all things being equal, male nurses make more per hour, make more per year in salary than a female nurse is doing the same job. That's the bigger issue. So it always comes back to that initial joke, which is why I played it at the beginning, which is there's a dump on your desk. Why are we arguing about how big it is? Right?
I remember the job that I had before going into education. I found out, they say you're not supposed to talk about your wages. That's because they don't want to get caught red-handed.
That's right.
Basically. Well, we did talk about our wages, and I found out that there was a man that was doing the exact same job as me. He had been there less time, had zero experience going in. I came in with 5 years of experience, do the math there, and we did the exact same thing.
Right.
I actually had the higher level of education than he did, and guess who made more?
Him.
He did.
Yep. Yeah, that's how that works. All right. Well, do you want to, let's see what else she has. But man. But I still love it. There's no gender wage gap, and she keeps telling us there's a gender wage gap. Nurses make 18% more if they're male.
Now, here's how one expert on nursing compensation, Professor Linda Aiken of the University of Pennsylvania, sums up the data. Career choices and educational differences explain most, if not all, the gender gap in nursing. The Department of Labor paper concluded that once these differences are accounted for across all professions, the unexplained wage gap is somewhere between 4.8 and 7%, almost identical to the 6.6 percentage gap found by the AAUW. But why is there any gap at all? No one knows for sure, as both the AAUW and the Labor Department concede. There are so many variables that drive wages that no single study can cover them all. Few wage gap studies control for variables such as dangerous work environment. Men are vastly overrepresented, for example, on oil rigs. And here's another variable. Men are more willing and able to work long hours without advance notice. According to Harvard economist Claudia Golden, even if two lawyers have the same education, same specialty, and work the same number of hours, firms pay more to someone who is willing to always be on call and ready to be in the office when the firm needs them, as opposed to wanting a more regular schedule. This isn't sexism. It's just common sense. With more realistic...
Well, that's the problem. So this idea that, okay, there are a lot of variables. We can't account for what exactly is causing all of it, right? In every field, right? What we can say for fairly certain is the one thing we know that's consistent is there is a social issue where there's different expectations on men and women. That's social within society. Now, if you're a proponent of those, then that's fine. But the thing about it is that is what's driving the gap here. Okay? So now we know that there's a gap. Okay? We can argue about what exactly causes it up and down and sideways, but that's a lot of what it is it's social issues, right? Well, just because I don't know exactly what the causes of the problem doesn't mean we can't pass, I don't know, Equal Pay Act or something, or what was the Ledbetter Act, right? Right? So now, when Lacey, as you told earlier, finds out that the guy's making more money than her, she can go complain and sue the employer. So when they're talking about it, what she's not getting to, and she's never going to get to, they never will, which is, what is the solution? The solution is that you should have, as a woman, should have some sort of repercussion if you're not getting paid fairly. And that would be generally to go to court. And those would be decided individually.